Want me? Should I just get started, or are you going to do an introduction, or what's happening?
Wait a minute, Dr. J. Dr. Deki will open this meeting.
Okay, I need to be co-host so that I can share my PowerPoint.
Already. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, already, Dr. J.
Is done.
Am I co-host?
Pak Deki,
Okay,
silakan Pak.
Yeah, now you are
Halo.
co-host.
thank you.
Bisa dengar saya? Halo?
Bisa Pak,
Oh
Dr.
ya. Good evening to everyone, especially our guest speaker, Dr. J. Smith. My name is Dr. Deki Gadas, a New Testament scholar and the president of Huperetes Theological Seminary in Batam, Indonesia. I think that everyone here agree with me that Dr. J. Smith is no stranger to all of us, even though we have never met in person. We have known you, Dr. Smith, as a warrior of Christ, which relentlessly fight the ideology of Islam for many, many years. We are also well aware of your research on history of Islam, how Islam began, including textual criticism of the Quran. That's why we are so excited to learn from you tonight. Without further delay, on behalf of Keluarga Iman Rasuli, brothers and sisters in Indonesia, we are welcoming Dr. J. Smith. Thank you for taking the time to equip us through this session. We hope that our first meeting tonight will not be the last, and we will continue to work together for the triumph of the gospel of Christ, for the glory of the triune God. Thank you, and God bless you all. Dr. J. Smith, the time and space is yours now.
Thank you, Dr. Ngadas. Listen, this is great to be with you. It looks like we're 12 hours apart. I'm way over here in the United States. You're there in Indonesia. Isn't that amazing? The technology that we can use, it we're right next. It's as if you're in the next room. I would love to be there with you. I'm sorry that I cannot. I hope to get to Indonesia and to see you all in person once COVID is finished and we don't have this problem with the pandemic. But because of the fact that I cannot get there, Zoom is second best. Now, I've been asked to speak about the Quran itself, this book right here. This is the book that is causing all the problem. This is the book that we're going to be doing a textual analysis. Now, that's fascinating because if you were to ask a Muslim, what do you mean by textual analysis of the Quran? They won't know what you're talking about. There is no textual criticism of the Quran that I am aware of. Muslims do not even consider that a valid exercise for a very good reason. The Quran is, as they say, eternal. The Quran is, as they say, uncreated. The Quran was, as they would admit, sent down over a period of 22 years from 610 to 632, and was then finalized by Uthman in 652, so mid 7th century. So why would there be any notion of textual criticism? What is there to critique? What is there to criticize? That is something for the Bible only, not for the Quran. So this whole exercise, this whole premise of looking at a book critically is unheard of. And more than that, is not done in Islam because it would not be very healthy. As you well know, living in Indonesia, there is no school that I'm aware of. Maybe you have heard of it. I don't know of any school in Indonesia that does any critical analysis of the Quran. If you were to do a critical analysis of the Quran in any Muslim country, you would have huge backlash. You would have an enormous amount of people who would not only confront you, but in some countries it's illegal and would be a capital offense. I'm thinking of Pakistan off the top of my head, where they have a law called the 295C law, which stipulates if you criticize the Quran or if you criticize Muhammad, it would be punishable by death. So you can see why this is not an exercise that's done within Muslim communities. They wouldn't do it. And for that reason, you will only find critical analysis of the Quran as something that is done here in the West. We are doing it. Don't wait for Muslims to do it. They cannot. They dare not. They will not. We can, though. Why? Because we've already done it to the Bible. This is an exercise that's been around since the 1800s. Since the 1800s, back in Germany, places like the University of Tübingen, Wellhausen, maybe you know of Wellhausen, who was one of the first, not the first, but one of the first to confront the Bible concerning the documentary hypothesis, to confront the Bible concerning historical criticism, redacted criticism, source criticism. What do I mean? These criticisms are well known within Christian circles. Dr. Ngadas, I'm sure you have studied historical criticism. I'm sure you teach it. And historical criticism starts from the premise that whenever there is a new manuscript or a new book that comes to light, has been discovered at so-and-so place, the first thing you do is you open it. You look at the text. You look at the script. By looking at the script in whatever language, then you translate it, take it, and you compare it with another text, unknown text. I'll give you an example. When the Sinaiticus, the Alexandrinus, the Vaticanus, these are the three major biblical codices. These are the metropolitan codices, were discovered in the 1800s. Tischendorf, who was there in Sinai, he went into the monastery, St. Catherine's Monastery, there in Sinai, and he saw a manuscript in a wastepaper basket. And he asked if he could look at it. And when he looked at it, he saw it was a manuscript of the New Testament written in Greek, but it was written with majuscule, these capitalized letters with words or sentences. And he realized that this is a very archaic script, because that script went out of existence, went out of usage in Greek in the 4th century AD. And he got excited. And he says, could I take this? And of course, they were going to burn it. That's why they had it in the wastepaper basket to keep warm. So they said, yeah, you can have it. So he took it, brought it back to England. They sent it up to St. Petersburg in Russia. And since that time in 1800s, when Tischendorf found that manuscript, they have done test after test after test. But the first thing they did was to read it, open it up, read the words on it, look at the sentences to see if it was the same as the existing scripture that we have today. Now, back then they had the Latin Vulgate, which is a completely different language. And so they did like with like, looking at verse after verse after verse to see if it was the same verses. They realized that this was the New Testament. It was Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, just like they already had in the Latin Vulgate. They then looked and they dated the script, and they dated the script to around 325 to 350 AD. That means the early 4th century, which the earliest in existence at that time. The earliest in existence, it was a complete text. Now, that is what you do with textual criticism. We've been doing this since the 70s, so we're way ahead of everybody. We're especially ahead of the Quran. So when the Quran comes into existence, this book here, the first question I ask of any Muslim is, have you tested this book textually, done a critical analysis? I'll show you all these up here. See all these here? These are all Quran. Every one of them is in Arabic. Every is over 1,000 years old. Not the actual printing. No, these have been printed this year. But each one of these has a different name on it. Khalaf, Al-Kasai, Ibn Khalif, Shoba, Ibn Amir, Galun, Warsh, Hafs. Did you hear me give those different names? Did you notice each has a different name? Every one of those that you see on on this shelf here is an Arabic Quran. No two are the same. They're all completely different Qurans, all written in Arabic, all over 1,000 years old. Ooh, How do I know? We open the pages. We look at script. We look at one script with another script. And the one that you have to compare it with is this one right here. This is the Hafs text, canonical text. This is the text that has been chosen for the whole Muslim world. But this text does not agree with this text. This is the second most popular text. This is the Warsh text. Warsh, Hafs. Different names. This man wrote this Quran in 796. This man wrote this Quran in 812. 796, 12. Muhammad died in 632. Do you see? Well, I see a problem immediately. This is written 144 years after Muhammad died. This one is written even longer, another 16 years after that. So can you see immediate, these are texts that were of the Quran. They are scripts of the Quran. They do not agree with each other. There are 5,000 differences between these two books. 5,000 differences. Now, you've been told there's only one Quran. I'm showing you two different Qurans. This one from the late 8th century, and this one from the 9th century. Ooh, That's called textual criticism. How do I know that? We opened it up. We've done a comparison, like with like. In the same way we did with the Bible, we're doing now that with the Quran. And that's just to give you an intro we're now finding with the Quran. And we are destroying the Quran with this new research. This new research, this may be the first time you've ever heard this. Much of what I'll be introducing now on the Quran may be the first time for many of you, because we're so far ahead of what the Muslims have done with their book. We are the ones that now know more about the history of their Quran than they do. Quran says they know how it's to be applied, they know how to exegete it, but they know nothing about its history. That we do. So what I'm going to be sharing with you today, now we're not going to get through too much today because there's just so much. So we'll get started with today and we'll go ahead and we'll do an introduction and then move from there. So let me go ahead and open up my PowerPoint and get started with my PowerPoint. And those of you who, what I want you to do, I'm sure many of you are going to have questions. So you will look at the bottom of your screen or at the top of your screen, depending on how your Zoom is set up, and you will see a chat button called chat. Open up the chat and you can talk to each other. Feel free to talk to each other in Indonesian. If you have a question, however, write the word question, Question, and then write your question. Write it out, type it out, so that when I come to the Q&A period, I will just look at those questions and I will try to answer each one. I can't say that I'll be able to answer them all, but I will try to answer as many as possible. When you send out the question, make sure you send it to everyone so that we all can read it. Otherwise, because the Zoom gives you the opportunity, the ability to certain individuals, but I see there are 34 of us here now, and it would be too much to if it goes to someone else, I won't get it. So make sure that it's sent to everyone so that I can see it. So let's get right into this first question. In search of a book, looking at the newest research on the history of the Quran. Now, you of course talk about the Quran, you need to ask what the Muslims claim. And the first thing they claim is that the Quran is uncreated, that it is eternal. It has always existed. And we see this in the Quran itself. The Quran makes that claim for itself in chapter 80, 22. Surah 8. If you look at any exegesis by Baidawi, Zamakhshari, Al-Suyuti, Ibn Kathir, any of these great exegetes, they will exegete that verse to mean it is the tablets. So that claim is in the. Secondly, they would claim that it was sent down between 610 to 632, that 22-year period, to a man named Muhammad. And he was in 2 different cities. He was first from 610 to 622 in Mecca, and then from to the last 10 years of his life, he was in Medina. So sent down to Muhammad between 610 and 632. Thirdly, they would claim that it was completed in 652. Another 20 years later, after Muhammad died, Uthman then wrote the final version. And that this Quran that I have in my hand with me, or this one here, Quran, these are both the same. This one is the only difference is this is translated into English. It's Arabic and English. This is just Arabic. So this Quran that I have in my hand, it's the same Quran that this book this book has not changed in 1400 years. Of 652 till today, 1400 years later, not one word, not one letter has changed. Not one word, one letter. That's claims. Those are the that all Muslims would make. And I would say whether they are radical, whether they are nominal, possibly not the liberals, because they've already given up on the Quran. But they only represent less than 1% of all Muslims. So we will dismiss them. They're not important. It's really the nominals and the radicals, the ones that you have in Indonesia, the ones that you have to talk to. 99% of the Muslim world would believe those four items that you see on your screen. We would not make that claim. Please don't make that claim about the Bible. The Bible, we say, was created by men, therefore it's not eternal. Who wrote it? We even put the names of many of the men who wrote the different books at the heading of each book. So we know very clearly that the Bible was created, written on earth by men using their own languages, using their own styles of writing even. Not sent down either. We would not agree that it was sent down. Inspired by God, yes, but not sent down. Not tanzil or nazil is the Arabic word that the Muslims use. It was nazil, sent down from those eternal tablets via the angel Gabriel to Muhammad, piece by piece by piece by piece from Mecca and Medina. So we would not say that of the Bible. Don't say that it was sent down. Complete, yes, that's the only area of these four that we would agree with. It was complete, yes, in its original form, but we don't have any original manuscripts. They don't exist. We don't have any original manuscript of the Quran for one very good reason. The New Testament, the Old Testament was written in about 1400 BC up until the 4th century BC. The New Testament would have been written within the 1st century AD. But at that time, they only had papyrus because they were not wealthy enough to have parchment or vellum. That was on animal skin, very expensive. So since they only had papyrus to write on, which are interlocking leaves, those disintegrated and they would have dissipated by today. So you would not expect them to last for 2,000 years. Of the New Testament that we know of. The earliest we have are fragments like the Bodmer Papyrus and the John Rylands manuscript, the fragments of the John Rylands manuscript in Manchester, the Bodmer Papyrus in Switzerland. Those would be the earliest, and they are 2nd century. It's not till you get to the 4th century that you get a final complete Bibles. Why? Because then you had Constantine, who was emperor, who commissioned the synod, and for the synods that he had, he wanted to make sure that they had manuscripts. So he was the one that paid for these enormously expensive books. Council of Nicaea in 325, I think he commissioned, from what tradition tells us, he commissioned 50 of these. Not all of them were finished. Only a few of them were made by the time of the Council of Nicaea in 325. Possibly the Sinaiticus is one of them, or the Alexandrinus, sorry, not the Vaticanus, which is in the Vatican in Rome, would be a second one of those two codices. commissioned by Constantine, but he was wealthy. He was emperor, so he was wealthy enough to commission these books, these codices, these parchments written on animal skin. The Sinaiticus itself, I understand, just to write that one book took 62 gazelle deers, the skins of 62 deers, just to write that book. So you can see how expensive they would have been. Now, would we changed in 1400, in 2000 years? Yes, they have changed in the last 2000. We know where the changes are. In my New Testament, I can't say about the Indonesian Bible, but in the English Bible, if you go to Mark chapter 16, from verse 9 to 20, there is a line right there, right before the verse 9, and it warns the readers that from verses 9 to 20 are not found in the Sinaiticus or the Alexandrinus or the Vaticanus. The earliest Greek manuscripts don't have those verses in it. Or John, the Gospel of chapter 7, verse 53 to John chapter 8, verse 11. In my Bible, there is a line before and after which warns the reader that those verses, the story of the woman caught in adultery, are not found in the earliest Greek manuscripts. The earliest being the Sinaiticus, the Alexandrinus, the Vaticanus. Now, why are they there then? Why do we leave them in there? Because there's nothing in those passages, Mark chapter 19, Mark chapter 16, verse 9 to 20, or John chapter 7 or chapter 8. There's nothing in those passages that's not found elsewhere. There's no new doctrine. There's nothing new. So that's why we leave them in there. But we warn the readers. So we know that the Bible has been changed. We know where they have been changed. The reason why is because with the Bible, we have a good 10,000 Latin Vulgates, 5,800 Greek manuscripts, 9,000 in other languages. That adds up to around 24 to 25,000 manuscripts, either complete or partial, that we can look at. We have such tens of thousands of manuscripts to look at that we can compare between all of them. How many manuscripts do the Muslims have for the Quran? The earliest century and 2 centuries, the earliest 2 centuries of Islam, they only have 6 manuscripts from the 8th and 9th century. So you can see, when you do like with like, we are by far way ahead of Islam with our Bible. So those 4 things we would not say about the Bible. Now, what is my remit tonight? Listen, I cannot critique uncreatedness or sent down. I'm not there in the 7th century. There's no way I could know what actually happened in the 7th century. But I can critique complete and unchanged, the last 2. Was the Quran complete in the 7th century? Has it been changed since the 7th century? Those 2 things I can critique, and I will. And that's what we're going to do from here on out. And I'm going to ask 4 things. There you see them on the screen in front of you. First and foremost, if Muslims are going to claim, as they do, that the Quran has a textual history that goes all the way back to Uthman in 652, then I want them to show me one Quran, one manuscript that goes back to 652. I want one. Just show me one. You're going to see why I'm saying this, because Muslims claim that there were 5 Qurans created at the time of Uthman, sent to 5 different cities. Medina, which was Yathrib before that, Mecca, Basra, Kufa, and Damascus. Basra, Kufa, and Damascus, Mecca, and Medina. So 5 cities, 2 of them in Saudi Arabia, 2 of them in Iraq, what is present-day Iraq, and 1 is what is present-day Syria. So those are the claims they make. Since they make those claims, I'm going to hold them accountable. You can as well. And say they need to show us one manuscript today, extant, period, from the 7th century. Listen, we're only talking about 1,400 years ago. That's very recent. If we can go back to the 4th century and the 5th century with 3 metropolitan codices of the Bible, complete codices of the New Testament, then by the 7th century, 300 years later, they should be able to come up with one. We're just asking for one complete manuscript of the Quran from the mid-7th century. That's 652, the time of Uthman. 2, that all I'm asking for is one complete manuscript. I don't want a fragment here or a fragment there or 2 folios here or 1 page here or a backside of a page there. I want all 114 surahs, all 114 chapters or books, not just the bits and pieces. I want to see an entire Quran from the time of the 7th or 8th century. Listen, I'm not even asking for the time of Uthman. I want to see if they can even come up with an entire manuscript by the 7th century. Why stop there? I want to see if they can come up with an entire manuscript by the 8th century. Why stop there? Let's see if Muslims can show me and you an entire manuscript of the Quran by the 10th century. Did I say 10th century? So I'm not just talking about 7th, 8th, or 9th. I want to see if they can show me a complete manuscript of the Quran in Arabic that's exactly like this one here from the late, this they claim is from the late 8th century. This is the Hafs text from Iraq. This is considered to be the canonical text. Let's see if they can show me a manuscript that equals this book. And you see this book is written in Arabic from the 8th century. So you can see I'm asking, this should be simple for Muslims. This should be simple for them. Well, we're that it is not so simple. Take a look at this one up here. Can you see it? I'm pointing to it. That is the Topkapi. That is the entire Topkapi that is claimed to be from the time of Uthman. I will destroy that in a future lecture. I also have over here, in fact, I've got it right behind me, right over here. I don't know if you can see these down here. I have 2 other ones, one from the Ma'il from the British Library, which is the Ma'il Quran, and the Petropolitanist Quran, which is the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. Those are 3 of the 6 that I've been talking about, 3 of the original 6 manuscripts. We're going to go and unpack them later on, and I have access to them. They're in my office. I have every page from those 3 manuscripts, and we are now looking at them, and not one of them is complete. Not one of them is complete. Not one of them completely agrees with each other, and not one of them completely agrees with the Quran we have today. Sure, let's hold off on that. We'll get to that at a later time. So obviously that means I want them to show me a complete manuscript from the 7th century. I don't want 8th, 9th, or 10th. I want it from the 7th century, all 114 surahs, that is unchanged, word for word, letter for letter, exactly like this Quran that's what I want. Muslims can give. Now, there will be 12 areas that I'm going to investigate. We're not going to do them all today. We're already over a half an hour into the talk, and I'm just getting to the introduction. But I'm going to be looking at what modern Muslim leaders claim, what they claim today about the Quran. Then we're going to look at what early Muslim scholars said in the past, in the 9th and 10th century, and see if those claims, if they're the same claims. You're going to find they're completely different claims. We'll look at some of the historical anachronisms. If it is an eternal that has always existed eternally on those those preserved tablets, not clay, sorry, preserved tablets in heaven sent down to Muhammad, if that is the case, then it should have no historical errors because it's eternal. If it's eternal, that means it has no human manipulation. Humans can write errors. God makes no error. So let's look and see if they have any historical anachronism. We'll be looking and seeing where quite a few of the stories come from, because we have been able to find many of the stories in the Quran do not come from God at all. They come from men, earlier writings. We're going to look and see the sources for those stories. And then we're going to get into probably some of the more damaging material. We're going to look at how the Quran came into being in the 7th century, what the Muslim traditions from the 9th and 10th century say, from the 9th and 10th century say about how the Quran was put together in the 7th century. And we're going to show you problem after problem after problem. But hold on to that. Let's wait till we get there. Then we're going to look at some new damaging material that's just come out it's not come out, it's just been made public in the last year alone, since last June 8, an interview happened. And we're going to look at the bits and pieces of that interview and show you how when this went all over on the internet, it just shut down any idea that the Quran has been preserved completely. And it's called the Holes in the Narrative interview. Holes in the narrative. Hold on, you'll see what I'm talking about when we get there. And we're going to show you there's not just one or two. There are 30 different. There are 30 of them, official ones. Those are only the official ones. Wait till you see when we get there how many more there were. And then we're going to look at the earliest manuscripts. This is one thing I began with. We're going to look at the Husayni manuscript. We'll look at the Samarkand manuscript, and then we'll look at the Sana'a manuscript. Those are the 6 major manuscripts: the Topkapi, the Ma'il, the Petropolitan, the Samarkand manuscript, the Husayni, and the Sana'a manuscript. Those are the 6 major manuscripts, and we're going to debunk each one of them, manuscript after manuscript after manuscript, to show that they are not the same Quran we have today. And what's most damaging, there are thousands of differences, and these have nothing to do with dots or vowels. This has nothing to do with the ijab or the harakats. These are to do with the razm. The razm, or the consonantal text, which is, I think, the Achilles heel of the Quran. We're going to show you how we can shut down the Quran just by looking at the script. From there, we're going to look at the Sana'a manuscript, because the Sana'a manuscript is probably one of the most citing, because it has 2 layers. It's a palimpsest. Palimpsest means it was a piece of writing on animal skin that got washed off and then rewritten over top. So there are 2 layers, the lower layer and the upper layer. And we're going to compare the 2 layers and show you that there was an evolution between the lower layer and the upper layer. There's about 20 years between those 2 layers, and what happened between those 2 layers, you're going to love to find out. We're going to look at the Birmingham folios. I call it the 4 carbon dated lab reports. We're going to look at carbon dating. That's what the Birmingham folios we're doing. We're going to show you not only how inexact those lab datings are, but what exactly are what is this Birmingham manuscript? What and why are the Muslims pushing it so hard? And how can you answer that response? And then we're going to get into the real damaging material. We're going to get into this book. This is the only book published of its kind. It's absolutely new, and it is devastating. This is done by Dr. Daniel Allen Brubaker, a good friend of mine. He wrote this in 2019 from research that he did for his doctoral research, his doctoral thesis. And he went around the world looking at the earliest manuscripts. Remember the 6 I told you, and 4 others. So 10 of the earliest manuscripts, all written in Arabic. Pictures. And he started taking pictures of variants. See, there's a variant. There's another variant. There's another variant. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 variants on just this picture that's on the cover of his book. And he found 4,000 of these variants. That means words that have been changed, erased, deleted, accreted. Some of them have been inserted. Others have been covered. Others have been pasted. Sometimes they wrote in the margin, like here, words that had to be added at a later date. And in every case, whenever you see these accretions, these deletions, these corruptions to the script, in every case, this has nothing to do with dots, has nothing to do with vowels, has nothing to do with diacritical marks. These are actual words. These are actual scripts. These are actually consonantal text. that have been changed over the centuries, possibly during the Ottoman Empire from the 1300s until today, so that the manuscript that was left behind now agrees with this text, the official text of the Ottomans, the Hafs text. Every one of those corrections was to standardize the script on those manuscripts to agree with this script, the 796 script, the late 8th century script, so that all the manuscripts now agree. But they were very clumsy. They didn't bother to even hide the work that they had done. They just erased sometimes whole lines and let you here you can see that they're erased. They inserted words above the line, below the line. They many times covered with paper. They just covered whole sentences, words after words, sentence after sentence. Sometimes you can see they've been left blank. Other times they wrote over top new words, new sentences. I mean, they weren't trying to hide it. Well, they really couldn't hide it because these are ancient manuscripts and we're now looking at them and we're now exposing them. So that's going to come when we look at the consonantal variants. And then we're going to look at what they have tried to do because of the demand that we're asking, because we have demanded an original Quran, since they claim that's original. We have demanded this original Quran. They have scrambled in the last few years trying to find a complete Quran, trying to find a complete Quran in the 7th and 8th century. And they've come up with 63 different fragments, 63 fragments to make 96% of the Quran by the 1st century AH, by 719, by the early 8th century. 63 fragments. Wait till you find out what we now know about those fragments. But you're going to have to wait because we're going to destroy any notion that there was a complete Quran by 719. All right. And then we're going to look and see, how did this book finally get chosen in 1924? What in the world was going on? And why is this the official and not one of those or the other 29? Why was this book chosen and not these, since there are 93,000 differences between this book and those? I just have 8 or 9 of the 20 that you can get. These I got on the internet. You can buy them today. I bought them here from Illinois, here in the United States. So those are the 12 areas we're going to go through. Now you can see there's no way I can get through all of this today. I'm just going to introduce this. This is an introductory talk. This is to get the ball going. I'll have to come back. We'll have to do more of these sessions, but there's an awful lot of material for you to use. Now, why in the world are we doing this? And I think what I'll do today, I won't get into the talk because it's going to take too long, Dr. Nagata. So what I want to do is tell you why this is important for our discussions. Some of you may say, well, maybe this is too technical. We don't need it. How can we use this in Indonesia? Much of what I'm going to be sharing with you today don't have to know a word of Arabic. Okay? Don't get flustered. Say, well, hold on a minute. This is way over my head. I'm not going to be able to understand it. This is for lay people like you, people who are, some of you are professionals, others of you are lay. Some of you will not think that this is important. We are finding hundreds of Muslims leaving Islam because of this material, hundreds. I go and I put up videos on my Fander Films site. Fander Films says PFANDILMS. I'll just write it here. Chat, you can see what I'm talking about. This is to everyone. Fander Films is my, there it is. Do you see Fander Films there? That is my YouTube channel. That YouTube channel has been going, I've had that up there since 2006. Remember, Fander Films was created in 2005. So almost as long as the YouTube has been working, I've had my channel up there. Now, Fander Films is a academic channel. I only use academic work. I'm not there to mock anybody. I do not use material that's there to denigrate Islam or denigrate the Prophet Muhammad. I don't do that. I'm only interested in the historical critique. Why the historical critique and why this kind of work? because I am finding that this is the Achilles heel of Islam. This is what's going to destroy Islam. And I'm interested in this material for a number of reasons. Let me just give you a list of them. First and foremost, the historical critique is the critique that everybody should be asking of any book that considers itself to be a revelation from God, including the Bible. If there is any book that makes that claim, that includes not only the Bible, but the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, the Vedas, the Book of Mormon, or the Granth Sahib for the Sikhs, any of these books that claim to be from God have to pass the historical test. And the historical test starts from the premise that if you make a claim about a book in a certain place, written at a certain time by a certain person, that those 4 areas, the name, the place, the event, and the time period, those 4 can be investigated. We must investigate those 4 areas. Because why? Because that's how you find the truth about a book. Every revelation that comes from God, if it does come from God, will talk about names, places, events, and dates. The Bible does. There was a man named Abraham who lived in the Euphrates Valley and moved to Canaan in 1900 BC. That's a historical claim. I've just made a number of claims. I'm talking about a person, I'm talking about a place, and I'm talking about event, and I'm talking about a date. You notice I've had all 4 of those within that statement. The same thing Islam makes about Muhammad. He was born in Mecca, moved to Medina at 622. So I'm talking about a man, a place, an event, and a date. When you make any of those 4 claims, they need to be investigated. And I'm going to be investigated all 4 on Islam. Now, for these sessions that I'm doing with you there in Indonesia, I'm not interested right now, that will come later, in looking at the man and the place. I'm looking at the book, the event, and the time. Okay? The book, the Quran, the event, its writing or its revelation, and the time, 610 to 632. Or actually, I should say 610 to 652, because that's when it was compiled completely. So those 3 things I will be investigating, because the same has been done to the Bible. The same thing needs to be done to the Book of Mormon, the Vedas, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, the Granth Sahib, you name it. Any revelation that makes historical claims has to be investigated historically. What's interesting is only the Bible has had this done. Christians are the only ones that have done this to their own scriptures. The Sikhs have not done this to the Granth Sahib. The Hindus have not done this to the Bhagavad Gita or the Vedas or the Upanishads. The Mormons have not done this to the Book of Mormons, and the Muslims have not done this to the Quran. We're going to do it because we understand it better than anybody else. We have already had our own history that's gone back 200 years of historical criticism. Redacted criticism. Redacted criticisms means saying one thing and then redacting it back to an earlier period. All right? Let me give you an example. Muslims claim that Muhammad received this revelation from 610 to 632. That's a historical claim. Where does that claim come from? Where does this material about Muhammad receiving a Quran from 610 to 632 from 2 different cities, one in Mecca, one in Medina? Well, where does this material come from about how the Quran was written? It comes from a man named Al-Bukhari. Al-Bukhari died in 870. 870 is the late 9th century. But the claim that Al-Bukhari is making is for the 7th century. That's called redacting it back. So he's saying in the 9th century that this book was written by Abu Bakr in 632, then rewritten by Uthman in 652, and that all the other manuscripts that disagreed with the book written in 652 had to be burned. That is Al-Bukhari, volume 6, book number 61, hadith number 510. I'm giving you book, volume, verse, or Akbar. Interesting, that was written in 870, for what was happening in the 7th century. Now, when you unpack that and look at that, say, hold on a minute, there's a problem here. Why were the other manuscripts destroyed? Why were they burned? The answer is, every Muslim will say, because they disagreed with the Qureshi dialect. These were dialectical differences on a written script in 652. Now, here's where the criticism comes in. Stop and think that through. How can you have dialectical differences in a written script in Arabic in the 7th century? The only way to have dialectical differences in a written script demands dots and vowels. You have to have dots and vowels to have dialectical differences in a written script. You can have dialectical differences orally. Yes, people speak different dialects. In Indonesia, you probably have different dialects in different languages, different ways of saying the same thing. The way pronunciation is different. But once you write it down and you read the differences, you have to have a lettering or dotting to be able to see that pronunciation in the written script. In the 7th century, there were no dots and vowels. Dots and vowels had not been invented yet. They were only invented in the 8th century. So how can mid-7th century, 652, you have different dialects written in a written text of Arabic, which only had 16 letters? Al-Bukhari says it happened. He was writing in 870. In 870, there were dots and vowels. Of course, he had no problem saying that the dialects were different. That's why he said he burned them. But that is 240 years later. Now that's called redacted. See, what have I done? I have now done redacted criticism. I have confronted that and said that is impossible to happen in the 7th century. It makes sense in the 8th century. That's why Al-Bukhari wrote it down. But can you see that's a historical anachronism? Looking at textual criticism. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use that kind of criticism. We're going to look at source criticism. When you look at the Quran, you will see story after story that are about biblical characters. Abraham. You know Abraham in the Bible, right? Abraham in the Bible came from Ur of the Chaldees, which is in southern Iraq today, and moved to Canaan, which is in what we would call Israel today, right? That's what the Bible says. What does the Quran say in chapter 21 of the Quran? The Quran says that he went into the Kaaba. Where's the Kaaba? The Kaaba is in Mecca, in Arabia. That he went into the Kaaba in chapter 21, verse 51 to 71, and he destroyed all the idols in the Kaaba. Next morning, the people seeing the broken idols, they grab Abraham and they put him into a fiery pit. Wait a minute. Is that story in our Bible? No, it's not in our Bible. We don't know of Abraham ever going way down south. He never went to Arabia. He never went 600 miles away, and he never went into any Kaaba and destroyed any idol. And he certainly did not get thrown into a fiery pit. That's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So how did that story get into the Quran? It's not from the Bible. So where did it come from? We know exactly where it came from. It came from a Jewish apocryphal account called the Mishnah of Rabbah, written in the 2nd century basically as a bedtime tale for children, written in the Jewish community, written in the vernacular, so that was then translated into Arabic. So by the 8th century, the Arabs who were trying to put together the Quran grabbed this story, put it into chapter 21, verse 51 to 71, without looking at the Bible first. Why? Because the Bible had not yet been translated into Arabic. Not until the late 9th century was it translated, not till 868 was it translated into Arabic. So this was the only story they had for Abraham, and they put it into chapter 21. That's called source criticism. Are you following this? Source criticism means looking and seeing where these stories came from and how is it that they lifted them in the 9th century or the 8th century and put them into the Quran, but they would never have been in existence. They were the wrong story at the wrong time with the wrong people in the wrong place. Bingo. That means we can throw those stories out. And the Quran is full of those kind of stories. So we're going to look at the redactics criticism, we're going to do source criticism, and then we're going to do the most devastating, which would be textual criticism. I'm going to do an awful lot of textual criticism, and that's where it gets fun. But before we do that, I want to open it up to questions and answers, because the reason that we're even doing this kind of exercise is because historical criticism is the most neutral of criticisms. You notice everything I've said in the last hour, not quite an hour, we're coming up to an hour. You notice everything I have said is from a Christian polemic. Have you noticed that? A Christian polemic. This is a historical polemic. Polemic means going on the offense. Apologetic is defense. Polemic is offense. I'm going on the offense. I'm asking questions of the Quran, but I don't have to be Christian to ask these questions. Anybody can ask these questions, including you. But this means humanists, atheists, Hindus, Christians, anybody can ask these questions, because this is completely neutral. It is the most neutral of exercises. And that's why it is the easiest for you to use, because those same questions were what are they're politically correct. Anything, have you noticed I've not said anything in the last hour which is hateful of Islam? I've said nothing that's Islamophobic. Therefore, you will not find me in prison. You will not find me being arrested, because I am not confronting Muhammad and saying things about his sexual proclivities, or about what he did to women, or about his violence. I let others do that. I like the David Woods do that, and the Sam Shamoons do that, and the Hatuntashes. They can do that. I'm not interested in mocking Muhammad. I am interested in historical questions, which not only safeguards me, it safeguards you, because you're in Indonesia. Indonesia, if you're going to spend your ministry mocking Muhammad, they're going to put you in prison. You're going to have litigation after litigation. You'll be going from court case to court case. And more than that, you could actually lose your life. You notice I do not get strikes against my videos. David Wood and Hatun and Sam get strikes against their videos all the time. Why? Because they're doing the mockery. Free to do that, but not in Indonesia. Please don't do that in Indonesia. I say the same thing in Saudi Arabia or in the Middle East. That is not the kind of material you should be using when you're in the Muslim context, for two reasons. It's not very healthy. Secondly, of people who are listening, you will lose an awful lot of Muslims. Once they hear you mocking their prophet or saying something that is embarrassing about their prophet, they're going to turn you off and walk away. We do the same thing. Muslims come up to me and they start mocking Jesus Christ. Why should I spend my time listening to them? I don't want to hear mockery. I want to hear criticism that is based on factual evidence that comes from a historical context. So in many respects, this is not only the easiest type of criticism, it's the most efficacious, and it will keep you alive. But more than that, it will also be most interesting. Because when you look, I did a debate with David Wood in November last year, so just a few months ago in California. David and I are good friends. We've worked together for many years. Every year in September, I'm in California with David, and we do seminars with people all over California. I've been to Ethiopia with David Wood. We have been on the same platform. So I have no problem with David Wood. We're good friends. But we did this debate on this very issue. Did Muhammad exist? I started from the premise that he did not exist. I'm not even going to get into that today. That's for a whole nother lecture at another time. David went from the premise that he did exist and that the Islamic traditions from the 9th and 10th century are correct and are usable and are efficacious. That debate went for 2 hours, well, maybe an hour and a half. Since that debate, there has been all kinds of people who have emailed me, who have watched that debate, and they have had a paradigm shift. And they realize that the historical critique is much more damaging than the moral critique. Or the moral critique is really what David and Sam and Hatun like to use. The historical critique is nothing to do with morality. It's everything to do with history. That's why it's called the historical critique. Not only is it more damaging, it's easier to use, it's more politically correct, and in the long run, it will destroy Islam. Why? Because Islam is dependent on two things. That's really all it's dependent on. One book, one man. The book and the man, the book and the man, the book and the man. That's what I've said for years. It's dependent on this book and the man Muhammad. This book and the man Muhammad. Christianity, likewise, is dependent on one book and one man as well. Have you noticed? We start from the same paradigm. We're dependent on this book and one man, Jesus Christ. Which is the bigger book? This one is. I keep it bigger for a reason. I make sure my Qurans are always small, so you can see which is the bigger, the better book. Why? Because this book is what keeps us. This is our revelation. We are absolutely dependent on this book, both the old and the new. What's more important, this book talks all about one man. His name is Jesus Christ. The Old Testament prepares the way for Jesus Christ. The New Testament then explains and exposes and gives us the gospel, his gospel that we use today. So therefore, we start from the same paradigm as Islam. We are the ones who are the closest to them because we are both absolutely dependent on two things. One book modeled by one man. The Quran for Islam, the Bible for Christianity, Muhammad for Islam, Jesus Christ for Christianity. So that's why we understand them the best. We are the closest to them, and we are the only ones that have an antidote. We are the only ones that have an alternative. We are the only ones that have the answer. So when you confront the Quran, make sure you bring them back to the Bible. Do not confront the Quran historically unless you ask the same questions of the Bible. Are you following me? When you confront the Quran with source criticism or redacted criticism or historical criticism, make sure you use and ask the same questions of the Bible. Source criticism. Where do we get the stories from? How is it we know that they're correct? Well, is it that we know that Abraham did live in 1900 BC, lived in Euphrates Valley, and went all the way over to Canaan? Redacted criticism. Is this nothing more than 2nd century BC material written back and given and redacted back to a man named Moses for the first 5 books of Moses? Can we show that actually Moses did write this material at that time in that place? From those, from his own, not only his own experience, but also inspired by God. Can you prove that? Those are the kind of questions you need to ask the Bible, because we're asking that. Historical criticism, textual criticism. Have we opened this book? Did we look at the script? Are we know whether or not that what is written here is exactly the same that's written in the Alexandrinus and the Vaticanus and all the other Latin Vulgates? This is called textual criticism. Then we have the right to ask the same thing of the Quran. That's why then we introduce these Qurans. We look at the manuscripts. We have the right to do that because once you ask the question of the Quran and you destroy its authority and you destroy its authenticity and its credibility, we need to bring them home. We need to bring them home. And we are the only ones that can bring them home. There is no other scripture that they can go to but the Bible. If we're going to confront the God of the Quran, Allah, we've got to bring them back to Yahweh. If we're going to confront Isa of the Quran, the Jesus of the Quran, we need to bring them back to Yeshua, the true name for Jesus in Arabic. Isa is not Arabic. Yeshua is. We're going to get into that later on. So every time you confront Quran, every time you confront Islam, every time you confront Muhammad, every time you confront Allah, every time you confront the whole edifice and the origins of Islam, make sure that after the confrontation, you bring them home. Bring them home to Jesus. Bring them home to Yahweh. Bring them home to the Bible. Because we are the only ones that have an answer. And I'm going to end with this before I open it up to questions. This really, the penny dropped for me when I was in London. I spent 25 years in London. Every Sunday, I would go down to a place called Speaker's Corner for 25 years. I counted it up the other day, and I found out that I was at Speaker's Corner 1,100 times, over 1,000 times. I went to this corner, which is in Hyde Park, which is the bastion of freedom of speech. It only happens on Sundays. It's been going for 160 years. I was there in 1992 up until 2017. For 25 years, I would go every Sunday whenever I was free, if I was in town. And I would get up on a little kitchen ladder and I would take on sometimes 10, sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands of Muslims at a time. And I did this every Sunday. Now, when you're on the ladder, you don't have computers in front of you. You don't have iPhones that you can look at. You have to have everything memorized in your head. And we would go on every subject. But I started introducing historical criticism there at the corner, really in 1995. And then in 2016 and 2017, we introduced the Qira'at in 2016, these books here. And by the time I had to leave to come back to America, I was leaving. I was there in 2017, July 30th, 2017, my last Sunday at Speaker's Corner. I was saying goodbye to everybody. As I was leaving the corner, the last man to come and say goodbye to me was an atheist. He had tears in his eyes. He said, "Jay, why are you leaving?" I said, "Well, I'm moving. We're going back to America. I need to be, this material has to go all over the world. And the best place to do it is in America," because we were using Zoom at that time. We've been using Zoom for 7 years. Zoom is new to you all. It's not new to me. I have been Zooming meetings for over 7 years now. And I said, we need to go to get this all over the world. Now, pandemic at that time. So usually I traveled from country to country to country, which I hope I can do in the future. And he was looking at me, he had tears in his eyes. And I said, "What's your problem?" He says, "Jay, you must not leave." I said, "You're an atheist. Why do you care about what I'm saying?" And he said, "Because you're the first Christian we've met that's actually talking our language." I said, "What language are you talking? What do you mean? What language?" He said, "Christian after Christian comes down to Speaker's Corner and all they talk about is what God has done for them. They give us their testimony. And we don't care diddly swat about their testimony because that's what God's done for them, but that's not what God's done for us. You, however, are the first one that's speaking our language." I said, "Explain what you mean." He said, "As atheists and humanists, we don't care about what God has done for you. Our question is much more simple. We're asking 3 words. Is it true?" That's all we're asking. Is it true? Is your Bible true? Did Jesus live and die and rise again? Is it historically accurate? Can you prove it to me? Can you show me? And you're the first one that's doing that. You've been answering that question for 10 years now, he said. Now, that means he knew me for 10 years. And he says, you're the only one that has now used those questions about is it true about the Bible and now are applying it to the Quran, applying it to Islam, applying it to Muhammad, which is true. That's what I was doing. In 2013, I started doing that. Actually, I started doing that in 1995. But at Speaker's Corner from 2013, 14, 15, 16, up in 2017. He says, you are the first one that's actually confronting the Quran using historical criticism, using redacted criticism, using source criticism, using the very criticisms we need the most, because these are the criticisms we understand the best. And I looked at him and I said, I'm glad you like this material. I'm glad it goes, it's something you can understand. I'm glad you see the efficacy of this kind of critique. But I want you to do nothing with it. Please don't use it. You're not the right ones to use it. I said, the reason why is that you have nothing to offer the Muslims. All you are interested in is destroying their Quran, destroying their God, destroying their prophet. What are you going to offer in its place? You have nothing to give them. This is only for Christians to use. We are the ones that have to use this. Because I am not interested in destroying their revelation if I don't have them, give them a better revelation. I am not interested in destroying their God, Allah, unless I can give them a better God, Yahweh. I do not want to destroy their view of Isa unless I bring them Yeshua and the gospel of Jesus Christ. What do you have to give them? All you want to do is get rid of religion completely. You want to give them nihilism. How is that going to help them? How can you say you love these people if you want to destroy their faith? True love destroys that which is evil and brings them back to that which is good. You replace it with something, but you have nothing to replace it with. We are the only ones that have something to give them. We are the only ones that have the antidote. We are the only ones that have the answer. We are the only ones that have the alternative. This is really a Christian polemic, and this should be done by the church. This should be done by people like you, the ones I'm talking to you. You need to use this material in Indonesia, much more so than I need here, because you have Muslims all around you. You're in the largest Muslim country on earth. You have a very radical group of Muslims there. You have very nominal Muslims there, and you even have some liberals. All three groups need to hear this material. The liberals will love it the most because they understand historical criticism better than anybody else. The radicals will hate it the most. You'll get the most reaction from them. But what you're doing, you will find that the radicals will be the first to acquiesce, because the radicals are the most dependent on historical acuity, on historical credibility for that which they believe. The nominals really don't really care. You're going to have a hard time really convincing them. This material is especially efficacious for the radicals and the liberals, from my experience. And that's why I hope to see not just tens, not just 20, but hundreds of Muslims coming to Christ because of this new material. Okay, that's enough from me. Let's open it up for some questions for you, and let's see if you've written any there. Let me go to the top here. Okay, here's the first question by Harry Hallam. You ask, how many popular Quran being followed? Which countries use different Quran? Did all Qurans require Hajj to Mecca? Okay, those are three questions. Let me just go through each quickly. How many popular Qurans are being followed? Okay, if you look at it, the most popular Quran is the one that was canonized in the last century, this one right here. This is the Hafs Quran. Now, when I'm saying Hafs Quran, this means that it's memorized with the Hafs pronunciation. The Hafs Qira'at. Qira'at means reading, or ahruf. These are readings. So this is done with the Hafs Qira'at. The only reason why this is so popular is because it was canonized in 1924 by Al-Azhar there in Cairo, and then made for the whole world in 1985 by King Fahd there in Saudi Arabia. So this is memorized. This reading is memorized by 95% of all Muslims. 95%. Okay? The second most popular is this one here, the Warsh. This is memorized. This has about 5,000 differences between those two. This is memorized by 3% of all Muslims, almost all of them in North Africa. So all across North Africa, this is the reading they memorize. Okay? It is 5,000 different places. It's different, but it's very popular in North Africa. The other ones that you see here are much less than 1%, each one of them, okay? And they're different parts of the world where they're memorized. I don't know which is the one that's popular there in Indonesia. I'm guessing it would be the Hafs. And you can ask your Muslim friends. I'm guessing in Indonesia, this is the one that's the most popular because it's been canonized. Now, Muslims are trying to make sure that all the others are finally going to get rid of, because this is a thorn in their side. They don't know what to do with all these different readings, all these different Qurans. They would rather get rid of all of them. They tried to in 1924, because all the ones that disagreed with the Hafs in the high schools there in Cairo, they took all of the other 29 that disagreed, took them out into a boat and threw them into the Nile, thinking that that would get rid of them. How stupid can you get? There's no way you can get rid of them all over the world. So, Harry, that would be there are 30 different ones that are followed by Muslims. Which countries use different Qurans? The ones that I know of, the two most popular are the Hafs all over the world and the Warsh just in North Africa. Did all Qurans require Hajj to Mecca? There is no reference in the Quran for a Hajj to Mecca. All right? The closest you're going to get is chapter 17, verse 1. In chapter 17, verse 1, it says, go from the great mosque to the farthest mosque. From the great mosque to the farthest mosque. It doesn't say Mecca or Medina. It's just Great Mosque to the farthest mosque. So what's the Great Mosque? Well, Muslims today translate and interpret that mean to the Masjid al-Haram. The Masjid al-Haram means the forbidden place of bowing, which would be Mecca today. To the farthest mosque, they would say, is Jerusalem. So you can see that right there, there's a historical problem right there. Because if this was written before 632, there were no Muslims living in Jerusalem in 632. So what mosque could there have been in Jerusalem in 632? There was no mosque in Jerusalem that early. The Muslims didn't even get into Israel or up to Jerusalem until 638, another 6 years later. So that's a historical anachronism. There was no mosque there. The Masjid al-Haram, which would be the Al-Aqsa Mosque, that was built in 709. That's the 8th century. So coming and going, we've got them. Can you see? This is called historical criticism again, and you can see that's an anachronism. So there's a lot of problems with that idea. That's the only verse that talks about the Hajj, or the closest to it. It's obvious that this was written in the 8th century, redacted back to the 7th century, and whoever wrote it forgot to look at their history books. There were no Jews living in Jerusalem for them to make that Hajj, to go up to Jerusalem that early. Okay, any more questions? I don't see any more. Oh, here's one from Dolly Novedo. What is the typical objection you find when discussing these findings with Muslims, and how do you answer those objections? Do you see ability to read and speak Arabic is required to discuss about this matter with Muslims? Okay, there's two questions. What's the typical objection I get? You don't speak Arabic. That's the first kind of thing they always want. Now, I do read and write Arabic, but have you noticed, have I said anything that's Arabic today? Well, I've said certain words. Do you need Arabic to do this? No. What's more, this has nothing to do with Arabic unless you're getting into the Qiraat and doing this. But I don't do this work. Listen, I read and write Arabic, but I'm not the expert in this area. I let the experts do it who know the grammar much better than I do. And they know the grammar better than 99% of all Arab speakers as well, because this is Quranic grammar. This is much more archaic Arabic. What's more, the Arabic that's in all of these books, even the modern one, even today's book, look at the Arabic in this book. The Arabic in this book does not come from Mecca and Medina. The Arabic in this book does not come from the 7th century that far south. The Arabic in this book, which uses the Alif Maksura, which uses the Tar Marbuta, which uses the definite article, the Al, those are three different references that you will find. Two of them are endings of words. The other one is the definite article, beginning of the word. That is not found in the Arabic that would have existed in the middle part of Arabia, in the Hijaz, where Mecca and Medina are. The Arabic that was used there is called Sabbaic Arabic. That does not have the Tar Marbuta. That does not have the Alif Maksura. That does not have the definite article. So where does the Arabic come from that's in this Quran? The Arabic that's from this Quran is Nabatean Aramaic. Nabatean Aramaic is from Petra, from Jordan, 600 miles further north. So if you're going to say you need to know Arabic, then you're going to have to use Jordanian Arabic. You're going to have to use archaic Arabic, and you're going to only have to you're only are going to be able to use 16 letters, because that Arabic only used 16 letters. Today's modern standard Arabic now uses 28 letters, 12 more letters. So what's the purpose of learning Arabic, since you can't even use it for the Quranic Arabic that was used at the time of the 7th century? But you will see that it's good to know Arabic, to read and write it. So it's good that I know how to read and write it. I took 2 years of Arabic so that I can do that. But most everything that you're going to find about the Quran and about history and about Muhammad and about in Mecca and Medina has nothing to do with Arabic. It has everything to do with history. Secondly, do you see the ability? What is the most thing that Muslims? What's the biggest objection? That's the first objection, and you can just shut that one down very quickly. It's like saying and asking this. Now, do you know how many Muslims do they ever confront the Bible? Have you known Muslims to confront the Bible? Yeah, they do all the time. They say the Bible's been corrupted. If a Muslim says the Bible's been corrupted, should we in turn say you cannot make that statement until you know Hebrew and Greek? What a stupid thing to say. Do you have to know Hebrew and Greek to ask the question whether or not the Bible has been corrupted? No, we don't ask anybody. If they're attacking the Bible, if they're attacking Jesus Christ, if they're attacking historical anachronisms within the Bible, we don't ask them to first learn Hebrew and Greek before they can make those objections. So why are Muslims asking everybody else to learn Arabic before they can ask any questions about the Quran? Unless you're talking about the grammar of the Quran, unless you're talking about the exegesis of the Quran, unless you're talking about the internal contradictions within the Quran, looking at it internally, you don't need to know Arabic to ask these questions. So the second question the second objection is, you're only arguing from silence. There is no Quran there because you're not there. But absence of evidence does not necessarily mean evidence of absence, right? Absence of evidence does not necessarily mean absence of evidence does not necessarily mean evidence of absence, which is true. That was an objection that made sense when I did my first debate on this material in 1995. Since 1995, however, and you're going to see this as we go into this material more, we have now come across the coins from the 7th century and the 8th century. We now have come across the rock inscriptions from the 7th century and the 8th century. We now have come across the mosques from the 7th century and the 8th century. And the coins, the rock inscriptions, the mosques, the manuscripts that we've now come across from the 8th and 9th century, when you put those four together, now we have all kinds of evidence. And this evidence is from the 7th, 8th, and 9th century, which means we are the ones who now have the evidence. We are not arguing from silence anymore. Back in 1995, when I had my first debate at Cambridge University with Dr. Jamal Badawi, I had to admit that I was arguing from silence. 25 years later, now in 2021, actually 26 years later, we are no longer arguing from silence. In fact, we have just turned this argument on its head, because now Muslims, everything they're going to tell me about Muhammad, everything they're going to tell me about the Quran, everything they're going to tell me about Mecca, everything they're going to tell me about how Islam began, about Muslims, and about Islam, those 5 areas, everything they're going to tell me comes from the 9th and 10th century. None of it comes from the 7th century. So now they are arguing from silence, not us. They don't have anything to support Muhammad or the Quran or Mecca or Muslims or Islam in the 7th century. Not a thing. I'm jumping the gun. You don't know what I'm talking about. That's yet to come. We're going to show you that this argument, these arguments, the historical arguments from the 7th century, completely destroy Islam historically. Okay, so you can see why they no longer will debate me anymore. Muslims will not debate me on this material. Why? How can you debate? There's nothing to debate with. They have nothing to show. I have everything to show, and we're going to train you up on how to do that. That's yet to come. Robert Redford, the actor. So, can it be said is a work of the Council of Saracens authors, 6th to 7th century, which was hastily compiled, considering the many absurdities and weird things in the contents of the Quran? Yes, exactly, Robert. And you've got it correctly. And that is exactly what happened. Once they appointed Muhammad as the prophet, Abdul Malik introduces that on the coins in 692. He introduces it on the Dome of the Rock in 691. He introduces it on the Caliphal Protocols in 692. So when Abdul Malik introduces it on the coins, the Dome of the Rock, and on the Caliphal Protocols, all within a 2-year period, that introduced Muhammad as a prophet. That was late 7th century. Once you have a prophet, he has to have a revelation. Every prophet has a revelation. They had no revelation. Can you then understand why his son, Al-Walid, was the one that started grabbing all this material, had different manuscripts that were starting to put together? There was a manuscript that became very popular in Damascus, in Syria, that was written by a man named Ubay ibn Ka'b. Another manuscript that became popular in Baghdad or Kufa that was written by Ibn Masud. But the one in Damascus had 116 surahs. The one in in Baghdad had 110 surahs. Then there was another manuscript that became very popular in Basra by Ibn Musa. So you had Ubay ibn Ka'b's with 116 surahs, Ibn Masud's manuscript with 110 surahs, and Ibn Musa's with 114. And then, of course, the one that became canonized was Zayd ibn Thabit's manuscript, which was from Medina. So 4 different manuscripts in 4 different cities, 3 different countries, not one of them agreed. And that's in the 7th century. That's what the traditions tell us. That's what the traditions tell us. Where are those 4 manuscripts? Why? They disagree? Because they had to hurriedly put it together. When you hurriedly put it together, you need to go, where do you go to get sources? You come back to the Bible. They thought they were coming back to the Bible, but look at all the stories in the Quran. In chapter 5, verse 31, in chapter 5, verse 32, the story of Cain and Abel. It's not a story that I see in my Bible. Where did that story come from? That came from the Targum of Jonathan ben Uzziah and the Mishnah, the Bar Sanhedrin, a 5th century document. Those are 2nd century and 5th century Jewish apocryphal writing. Look at the story of Solomon and Sheba in Surah 27, ayah 17 to 44. That's a story from the 2nd Targum of Esther, a 2nd century apocryphal account. So they started borrowing all these Jewish apocryphal accounts. And then the story of Jesus in Surah 19 and Surah 3 and Surah 5. These are all sectarian Christian sources, all written in Syriac, and they are Gnostic writings. That's why the Jesus in the Quran I don't recognize. He's a Gnostic Jesus. He is a Jesus who spends his whole time as a baby doing miracles as a baby. I don't remember Jesus doing any miracles as a baby. And then as an adult denying his divinity. I don't remember Jesus ever denying his divinity. It's not the Jesus of the New Testament. It's a completely different Jesus. Even the name Isa is not Arabic. The story hurriedly. Different sources, you not only take the story and put it into the Quran, you take the name as well. So the Syriac name for Jesus is Iesu. You bring it into Arabic, it becomes Isa. They've got the wrong Jesus. They've got the wrong name, in the wrong date, at the wrong time. There are the 4 things you're looking for. And I've just used redacted criticism, source criticism, and textual criticism to eradicate the person of Jesus Christ in the Quran. Do you see how easy this is? That's why and it's a great question you're asking, Robert. It's obvious that this was put together rather hurriedly. It's obvious it's almost all borrowed from other sources. And when you borrow from other sources, you borrow the inaccuracies, you borrow the historical anachronisms, and you borrow all the corruption. There are corrupted scriptures. They went to the wrong scriptures. They should have gone to the Bible and borrowed the Bible. Okay? Okay, great question. So that's from Robert Redford. Coming on down to Dolly Noviedo, could you give us some examples on the variants found in the different Quran versions you have that are the most damaging and have huge differences in meaning? Listen, Dottie, we could do that, but not today. We're going to unpack those. We're going to look at them. I'll give you slide after slide after slide. I have about 70 slides just doing a comparison with the Hafs and the Warsh. The Hafs, about 43 of them are just between these 2 books right here. I'm going to show you how easy this is. And if you're going to buy 2 of the Qira'ats, buy these 2. Get these 2. Keep them in your library and show them to Muslims, and then just show where in each of them, and you'll see the words are different, the phrases are different, sometimes entire sentences. Do they change the meaning? In every case, when you change the word, you change the meaning. When you change the meaning, sometimes you change the practices. Sometimes you change the belief. At other times, you change the doctrine. So yes, they change the meaning. Drastically, hold on. You'll see when we get to that material. Harry asked this question. That means the Hafs version being supported and promoted by Saudi and Al-Azhar, exactly. And that's why the Hafs is now becoming the standard version around the world today, so that 95% of the Muslim world is now using the Hafs. Several people, this is Christos Gimbal, Kita KJG, says this. Several people said that the story of Muhammad is as fake as Aladdin, Alibaba, Sinbad, etc. Is it true? Yes, that is true. Because those stories had come from the same century. Now, I don't know when Sinbad or Alibaba or Aladdin, what century they came from. What we do know is that the century where the story of Muhammad was put together was not till the next century. The first one to write down his story is a man named Ibn Ishaq. He died in 765, but we don't have his story. We have this book here. This is the story of Muhammad. This is the classical account, translated by Alfred Guillaume. Now it says up here, a translation of Ibn Ishaq. That is a lie. Nothing here is from Ibn Ishaq. We don't have anything from Ibn Ishaq. We have no idea what Ibn Ishaq said. So who actually wrote this book? Not Ibn Ishaq. So why did Alfred Guillaume do that? Alfred Guillaume didn't do that. It was Oxford University Press that did that, because the Muslims are demanding that they put Ibn Ishaq's name there. This is called political correctness. This is called dimitude. This is called acquiescence to Islam. Can you see why they want Ibn Ishaq? Because they want to get the biography back to 765. 765 is 130 years after Muhammad. Even that's damaging. Ibn Ishaq is damaging. But we have nothing from Ibn Ishaq. We don't know if one word is from Ibn Ishaq. So who wrote this book? Who wrote this book? His name is Ibn Hisham. He died in 833. He lived way up north. He did not come to Mecca, Medina. He did his work in Baghdad and in Kufa, which is hundreds of miles north and hundreds of miles to the east. He had nothing to do with Mecca, Medina. He lived in the 9th century, and this is the first biography of Muhammad right here. This was all, therefore, had to be concocted. But this is 200 years after Muhammad's death. 200 years is the first biography we have about Muhammad. Can you then see why that's so damaging? That's why Muslims don't want you to know this. That's why we're going to introduce this from the get-go when we come back the next time that I speak. Now, John Trevor, in your earlier presentation, you were talking about to do a research on the 6 numbers of the fragments. How far have you gone? We now have finished that. That's all going to come up. The 63 fragments. We're going to do that, but that's coming yet. It may be a few talks because there's an awful lot of stuff to unpack. So hold on to that one, John. We'll get to that. Dolly asked this question. What do you think about Altikulich's response to Dan Brubaker's book? Is there any other response out there from academics or Islamic scholars about his research? Yes. Haitham Sidki had the first response, and he wrote his response in 2019, December of 2019. Daniel Brubaker has done a complete response to that. That was just set up 2 months ago. If you go up and if Dr. Ngadas, if you could ask me for that, email me and ask me for that, I can send it to you in PDF and you can send it out to everybody. So that has been responded by Dr. Daniel Brubaker himself. He has just shut that whole paper down. Now, what Dr. Altikulich just came out a few weeks ago, Dan Brubaker now has got his book, an entire book written by Dr. Altikulich on trying to shut down Dan Brubaker. Why would the greatest scholar in the Islamic world today, remember, this is Islam's greatest scholar on the Islamic manuscript. This is his book. He was the one that printed this. He was the one that did the research on this. All the earliest, this is supposedly the greatest of, I've got it upside down. Might happen if I have it right side up. This is the earliest, supposedly the earliest manuscript of the Quran, the Topkapi. He is the one that actually controls it. He is the only one that has, and it's done by Altikulich and Ekmenuddin Ihsanoglu from Organization of Islamic Conference Research Center for Islamic History. This is their best scholar on the issue. He is the one that has done the work on the Topkapi, the Samarkand, the Ma'il, the Hosseini, the Petropolitanus, and the Sana'a manuscript, all 6 manuscripts. They're all introduced on that book, his research. Why would he spend his time attacking this little book here? This is only 100 pages long. Why would the greatest scholar in Islam even consider this important? And why would he publish it from the same publishing site that published these manuscripts? Proving that they are scared of what Daniel Brubaker has found. To me, this shows me fear at its greatest. You can see why this is so damaging. One little book with just 20 examples, just 20 out of 4,000. He has found 4,000. This is the first 20. This is the first book. If you're getting the greatest scholar in Islam, who's even reading that book, writes an entire book. There is no other book that he has written about any other piece of work except the manuscripts himself. That's what he writes, those books right there. And yet he spends an entire book of even longer than this one, 110, or I think it's 115 pages, to shut down Daniel Brubaker. What does that tell you, folks? They are scared. Now, I have not read Altakulich's book because I haven't got it yet. It's in the mail. I'm waiting for it. Dan Brubaker now has it. He is now unpacking, and I've already been on the phone to him. He's already said it's almost the same arguments as Haitham Siddiqui. He has not changed the arguments. So in respect, this paper that I'm going to send you with his response to Haitham Siddiqui already will shut down Altakulich as well. Okay? So fear nothing. Daniel Brubaker is on top of it. But isn't this quite an accolade for Daniel Brubaker? For the greatest scholar in the whole entire Islamic world to pay that much attention, to not only read his book, to write an entire book and get it published in his publishing center against his little book of 20 corrections. Woo! I mean, when this came out, I got on the phone to Daniel Brubaker and said, God bless you. Can you see how much damage you're doing? And you're the first to do this. No one else has done what you're doing. Now, Daniel Brubaker has his own YouTube account. It's called Variant Quran. V-A-R-I. Let me just write it here. Variant Quran. You need to go up to his. Yeah, I've just written it on the. That's to everybody. Oh, sorry. That should be to everybody. Let me just do this again. Go on to YouTube and look at Variant Quran. He's putting up a video almost every week. Almost every week, maybe every other week. Look at those videos. He is approaching almost 20,000 subscribers now. Yet everything he's putting up there is about these variants. He's only been going since last June. He's not even a year up there, and he's already coming up to 20,000 subscribers. The material he's putting up every other week or every week is going to be the most damaging. And that's why I just, I praise God for people like Daniel Brubaker. The fact that he has spent his whole career working on these corruptions, on these changes, on these variants, shows that the Muslims don't know what to do with them. So what do I think about Altakulich's response? The fact that he even responded, the fact that he even wrote an entire book shows me that he is scared, And the fact that he has come up with nothing new, that what Haitham Siddiqui already said in 2019, we're in 2021, 2 years later, and he has not come up with anything new, shows me that he does not know what to do with this material. Okay, I think one more question here from Japheth John. Of all the Muslim apologists that you have debated, have any one of them ever acknowledged the various versions of the Quran that they actually have? And what were the comments on these variations? Japheth, no Muslim will debate me on this. My last debate I did with a well-known Muslim was in 2014. That's 7 years ago. In the 1990s, I did all the debates in Britain for all the universities. Whenever there was a challenge by Muslims to a Christian on the university campus, they would have me come and do all the debates because I was the only one that did debates in Britain at that time. And I went from university to university, debate after debate on every issue. By 2010, the Muslims were so angered by what I was doing, they shut down and had me expelled from every university. So from 2010, I could do no more debates because I was seen as persona non grata. Why? Because they called me a hate preacher, an Islamophobe. Yet everything I was debating were their debates. They were challenging us to the debates. And every issue where they chose the issue. So how could I be a hate preacher unless they were hate preachers as well? How could I be an Islamophobe unless they were Christianophobes? So it was rather ironic. But in 2014, then I challenged Dr. Shabir Ali. Dr. Shabir Ali, I would say he's probably the world's best debater, Muslim debater in the English-speaking world, which is where all the debates are happening in English. He and I debated on the Quran, and I was the one that introduced these 6 manuscripts, including that one up there. That one up there. I introduced them for the first time using Daniel Brubaker's material. Now, this book hadn't been printed, so I just used his doctoral thesis. And at that time, Daniel only knew of 800 variants, only 800. So that was in 2014. Shabir Ali's response to that was, who cares? I don't need manuscript evidence. We know that if you take this set of verses with this set of verses, you get the number 19. When you look at this verses with this verses, you get number 19. When you look at these words with these words, you get number 19, 19, 19, 19, the miracle of the number 19. That's all he could come up with, the miracle of the number 19. I finally, in the rebuttal, I turned to him and I said, which manuscript are you looking at? Are you looking at the Topkapi? There are no verses in the Topkapi. And the verses that do exist, the way it's put together, does not follow the Quran that we have today. Are you looking at the Petropolitanus? It only goes up to 25% of the Quran. That one's not complete. Neither are any of these complete. And there was no versification that early. So what verses are you looking at? What reference are you going to? He finally had to admit it was this book here, the 1924 Hafs text. 1924, that's less than 100 years ago. It was not even 100 years ago, this book here. I said, that's not even 100 years old. And you're finding this number 19. I said, what about the Topkapi? See if you can find the number 19 there. Or why don't you go to the Petropolitanus? Or why don't you go to the Mayan? Why don't you go to the Samarkand? And why don't you go to the Sana'a manuscript? Because none of them agree with each other. There's no verses there. You won't find 19 in any of them. So even if you find a miracle of the 19, you can do that with any book. You can do that with the Bible. You can do that with Moby Dick. That has been done to Moby Dick. I said, you can find all kinds of numerization. That's called numerology. It's a great exercise. It means nothing more than if you put into a computer, there's many variations, you are going to get patterns within every piece of literature. That's all it is. It's patterns. He had no rebuttal. He had no rebuttal. He did not know that these earliest manuscripts did not agree with his theory. He had no idea because no one has studied them. Remember, I said at the very beginning of this hour, nobody has studied this in the Islamic world because you don't dare study the critique of the Quran. You don't look at a critical analysis of the Quran. If you do, you would not live very long in the Muslim world. To say nothing of, you would lose your career. He would lose all his funding. To say nothing, that would shut every door down to him from getting into Muslim enclaves. So you can see why there is no rebuttal, and nobody will now debate me since 2014 on this material. Would you debate me? Would you take me and go public with this? Because in debating me, that means it goes public. Once it goes public, we film it. Once I film it, it goes up on the internet. That means everybody can see this material. No wonder they don't want to debate this. It is not debatable. Okay, and the last question by John. Do you and other researchers often get threats in pursuing research on this historical criticism? If so, how serious is the threat? Yes, of course. I mean, listen, I used to get threats all the time. At Speaker's Corner, I was there physically every Sunday. I was on a little ladder with just 2 steps. So just to put my head above that, there were tens, sometimes hundreds of Muslims around the ladder. They would yell at me. They would give me death threats. Sometimes they would try to follow me home. I got beat up a few times. I got my glasses broken. You can see here a scar where they tried to open up my throat. So I did get beat up, but I'm still here. I haven't died. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do this lecture. I don't worry about death threats. Death threats are usually nothing more than to shut you down. They are for intimidation. Now, I cannot say for Indonesia. Please don't quote me about Indonesia. I don't know the situation there. It may be much more difficult for you in Indonesia. But here in the West, we get threats all the time, but they're not going to carry them out. Not against me. The people that they are going to kill, the ones they will attack, are usually apostates. Many of you probably may be apostates. You have left Islam. Those are the ones that I feel much more insecure about. People like Hatun Tash or Al-Fadi, my colleague that I'm on with all the time. He has to be careful. So does Hatun Tash. I don't have to be worried about it. The Lord, we have a great God, and He's going to protect me. And I will know that whenever I go into battle, I know that I'm there because God wants me there. I know that He will protect me. I know that He is not going to let me die until it's my time. So I don't worry about it. Who cares about death threats? In 25 years of going physically down to the corner every Sunday, many times I would look at the camera as I was being recorded, and I would say to the Muslims who are watching me, you know where I am every Sunday. I'm here at Speaker's Corner at Hyde Park in London every Sunday. Come on down. If you have a problem with me, come and please say it to my face. But I am protected by the Lord Jesus Christ. I've got the Holy Spirit. I've got two angels on branches above me called Harry and Larry. I've never seen them, but the Muslims have seen them. I call them Harry and Larry. I've got another angel, a black angel, who has now protected me twice. One from being kicked to death, and another time from being punched. And he put his body around me and got me out. And he took the punches for me. And when I turned around to thank him, he had disappeared. I call him an angel. He's my black angel. I call him Barry. So I have Harry, Larry, and Barry. 3 angels, 2 in a tree and 1 on the ground, who keep me protected. All of you will be protected. There are angels protecting you. Once you go into battle for Jesus Christ, you're going to be protected. So don't worry about the death threats. The Lord will not let you go until it's your time. And it's really not your time. It's His time. And I see there's one more question here. Several people said that the story of Muhammad is as fake as Aladdin, Allah Biba, Sinbad, etc. Is it true? Because those, I think I already answered that question. Same century. No, I've already answered that one. So, John, I hope you got it. Yes, it is true. It is like Alibaba, but not from the same century. Those are actually predate the 7th century. The story about Muhammad does not even begin to appear until the 8th century, not till the mid 8th century, not till after 749. Okay, and was finalized in 833. So that's the 9th century. So really, the story about Muhammad does not really be introduced until the early 9th century. 833 and later. Okay. Well, listen, Dr. Nagadas, I'll give it back to you. It looks like that's as far as we're going to go today. We're coming up on 2 hours. Thank you for your time. We'll have to plan another time because I only got into the introduction, but maybe that's good that we did the introduction. If there's any last question, I'll take them now. Other than that, I'll give it back to you.
Okay, Jay, thank you for the lecture. Host, apakah kita ada sesi tanya jawab dulu atau gimana?
Kayaknya udah Pak.
Oke, kalau gitu Pak Rino silakan closing. Say thank you untuk dia lah. Okay, Jay, thank you for the lecture. I think there is no questions anymore. So we really hope that we can do this anymore in future.
Yes, just let me know the time. Just let me know the date, and we'll get together. And I'll certainly do more of these sessions because there's an awful lot more yet to unpack.
And thank you for your hard works and research and all of your efforts for the glory of the gospel. We pray for you from Indonesia, and we hope you will pray for us too. We have the same difficulties here as well as you in the West, but we will do the work for the glory of God, and God will protect us from anything will threat us, and He will bring the most glory for His name. And thank you, Dr. J. Smith.
Let me
God
end with
bless you.
prayer. So let me pray quickly for you all. Lord, I want to thank you for this time, this session. I want to thank you for these great men and women who live there in Indonesia, who are in ways are really on the battleground. They're really on the frontiers. Lord, they need this material more than any others. Lord, help them to understand it, help them to be able to inculcate it, and help them to be able to use it in their own ministries. As we leave now, we ask, Lord, to not only infill us with your spirit, so that we are given the right words to say in the right time, in the right season, with the right people. because it is your ministry that we're doing. This material is not good enough if we just leave it on our computers or leave it in our minds. We need to speak it out. We need to be able to teach it. We need to be able to debate it. We need to be able to discuss it. And more than that, Lord, we need to bring about disillusionment in the Quran and in Muhammad and in Allah and bring them home to you, our Lord Jesus Christ, your gospel, and
Amen.
your scriptures. Lord, may that be always on the forefront of everything we do. May we minister for you, and everything we say, may it represent you. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jay.
Amen.
See you.
Thank you, Dr. J.
Thank you, Dr. J.
See you.
Thank you, Dr.
Bye-bye.
J.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hope to see you back.
Sorry, sinyal putus.